He moved in next door 3 days ago, and somehow he already knows more about me than people I've known for years. I wish I could say that was an exaggeration, but the truth is, Noah Bennett had a strange talent for noticing the little things I tried so hard to hide. My name is Ethan Miller, and before Noah arrived, my life was beautifully predictable. I woke up in my small apartment, made coffee strong enough to convince myself I was a morning person, and spent my days drawing illustrations at my desk while pretending I wasn't lonely. It wasn't a tragic life. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels comfortable until someone new walks into it. And then suddenly, you realize how empty the room actually was. The first time I saw Noah, I was standing outside my building holding a box of old art supplies that was one bad decision away from falling apart. A moving truck was parked beside the sidewalk, blocking half the entrance. Then he stepped out, tall, calm, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, carrying a box like he had done this 100 times before. He looked like the kind of person who belonged in a magazine about perfectly organized lives. Meanwhile, I was struggling with a box that literally had the words, "Do not drop," written on it because I had dropped it twice already. "Need a hand?" he asked. 3 words. That was it. Completely normal. Completely harmless. So why did my brain suddenly forget how conversations worked? "No, I'm good," I said quickly. "I mean, not good. The box is heavy, but I'm handling it. Emotionally and physically. Mostly physically. The moment the words left my mouth, I wanted to disappear into the floor. Noah looked at me for a second, then smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. "I'm Noah," he said. "I just moved into apartment 4B. Of course he was my new neighbor. Of course the person who made me forget basic communication skills was going to be living 20 feet away. "Ethan," I replied. "Apartment 4A. So we're neighbors." The way he said it was simple, but something about it stayed with me. Maybe because I had spent so long building walls around my routine that I forgot what it felt like when someone new knocked on them. That evening, I heard a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, Noah was standing there holding a small toolbox. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Do you happen to have a screwdriver?" Mine disappeared during the move. I should have just handed him one and closed the door. That would have been normal. That would have been safe. Instead, I invited him in to look for one together because apparently my survival instincts had decided to take the night off. 10 minutes later, we were laughing about how badly organized his boxes were. 20 minutes later, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't thinking about how strange it was to have a new neighbor. I was thinking about how easy it felt to talk to him. And that was the first moment I knew Noah Bennett wasn't just moving into the apartment next door. He was moving into a part of my life I hadn't even known was waiting for him. The strangest thing about having a new neighbor was not seeing someone unfamiliar every day. It was realizing how quickly someone unfamiliar could start feeling familiar. After Noah moved into apartment 4B, my carefully organized routine slowly began changing in ways I never expected. At first, it was small things. A quiet knock on my door when he received one of my packages by mistake. A quick conversation in the hallway that somehow lasted 20 minutes. A simple question about my drawings that turned into a conversation about everything except my drawings. Noah had this way of making ordinary moments feel important. I noticed it most on Saturday morning when I was struggling to carry a stack of groceries up the stairs. I was halfway to my apartment, balancing 3 paper bags and wondering why I had convinced myself I did not need a cart, when Noah appeared from the floor below. "You know, most people use both hands for groceries," he said. I looked down at the bags. "I am aware. I just enjoy making simple tasks unnecessarily dramatic." He laughed, and that sound caught me off guard. It was not loud or forced. It was the kind of laugh that made the hallway feel warmer. He took one of the bags before I could argue. "You do not have to help me every time you see me." "Struggling," I said. "I know," he replied. "I just wanted to." Somehow, that answer stayed with me longer than it should have. Later that afternoon, Noah knocked again. This time, he was holding a small coffee maker. "I bought this yesterday," he explained. "Turns out I have no idea how to use it." I stared at him. "You are an architect, but a coffee machine defeated you?" "Buildings make more sense," he said seriously. "They do what you expect them to do." I laughed before I could stop myself. That was becoming a problem. Noah was making me laugh too easily. We spent the next hour standing in my kitchen, reading instructions, and pretending we understood them. It was ridiculous. 2 grown adults trying to operate a coffee machine like it was advanced technology. But somehow, I found myself enjoying every second. I started noticing little things about him. The way he always thanked people. The way he listened instead of waiting for his turn to speak. The way he looked at my artwork with genuine curiosity instead of just saying it was nice. Most people looked at my drawings and saw colorful pages. Noah looked at them like they were pieces of me. "You put a lot of emotion into these," he said while holding one of my sketches. I shrugged. "It is easier to draw feelings than explain them." He looked at me for a moment. "I understand that." For some reason, those 3 words meant more than I expected. Because maybe Noah understood me a little. Maybe he saw the parts of me I usually kept hidden behind jokes and awkward comments. That night, after he left, I sat at my desk staring at a blank page. Normally, I knew exactly what I wanted to draw. But this time, my pencil moved before I had a plan. And when I looked down, I realized I had drawn the view from my window. Not the street. Not the building. Not the city lights. I had drawn the apartment next door. And for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of what a new person might change in my life. I was starting to wonder what my life had been missing before he arrived. I used to think people only entered your life in big, unforgettable moments. A dramatic meeting. A perfect first impression. A story you could tell everyone later. I never expected it to happen through a coffee machine, a borrowed screwdriver, and a neighbor who somehow made my apartment feel less lonely. But Noah Bennett was becoming part of my everyday life before I even realized it. A few weeks had passed since he moved into apartment 4B, and our conversations had slowly become a normal part of my routine. I would see him in the hallway before work. We would exchange messages about packages delivered to the wrong door. Sometimes we would stand outside our apartments for a few minutes, talking about random things until we both realized we had been there longer than expected. It was comfortable, almost too comfortable. The strange part was that Noah never seemed to force anything. He never tried to impress me. He never acted like he needed my attention. He simply showed up as himself, and somehow that made me want to show up as myself too. One evening, I was sitting at my desk trying to finish an illustration when my computer suddenly froze. I stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed me. "Great," I whispered. "Exactly what I needed today." A soft knock came from my door a few minutes later. When I opened it, Noah was standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. "I heard you talking to your computer again," he said. I looked behind me. "My walls are officially too thin." "Maybe," he said with a small smile. "Or maybe you just have very emotional conversations with technology." I laughed and accepted the coffee. "You brought me one. I figured you needed a break." That simple sentence stayed with me. Because Noah was good at noticing things. Not the obvious things everyone saw. The small things. The tired expression I tried to hide. The moments when I got too quiet. The times when I forgot to take care of myself because I was too focused on my work. We sat on the floor near my coffee table that night, drinking coffee and talking about the lives we had before this building became home. Noah told me he moved because he wanted a fresh start. He had spent years chasing success and following expectations that did not always belong to him. Sometimes you wake up and realize you built a life that looks good from the outside, but it does not feel like yours, he said. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. I told him how I used to dream about becoming a famous artist, but somewhere along the way, I became afraid of failing. Noah looked at me and said, "I think you are harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be." I did not know how to respond. Nobody had ever said that to me before. That night, after Noah went back to his apartment, I sat by my window and watched the lights from his place across the small space between us. It was strange. Just a few weeks earlier, that apartment had been empty. It had been nothing but a closed door beside mine. Now, behind that door, there was someone who made me smile without trying. Someone who made ordinary days feel different. And maybe the most surprising part was not that I was getting closer to Noah. It was that, for the first time in years, I was not trying to stop it. The problem with feeling safe around someone is that you start forgetting how scary it was to be alone. I did not notice it happening at first. It was not one big moment that changed everything. It was 100 small ones. Noah leaving a cup of coffee outside my door when he knew I had a deadline. Noah remembering the name of a character I was drawing weeks earlier. Noah knocking just to ask how my day was, even when he had no reason to. Somehow, the person who had been a stranger a month ago had become the person I looked forward to seeing the most. And that realization was both exciting and terrifying, because I knew what happened when you let someone get close. They could see the parts of you that you usually kept hidden. They could discover the doubts, the insecurities, the messy thoughts you tried to organize before anyone noticed them. Noah had already seen more of the real me than most people ever had. One Friday evening, a storm rolled through the city. The rain hit my apartment windows so hard that even my usual background music could not compete with it. I was working on a new illustration when the power suddenly went out. The entire apartment became dark and silent. Perfect timing, I whispered, because apparently my computer and my electricity agreed that I needed a break. I reached for my phone flashlight and started searching for candles. A few minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. Somehow, I had started recognizing Noah's knock before I even opened the door. He stood there holding a small flashlight and a bag of takeout food. "I figured you might not want to eat cold cereal for dinner again," he said. I looked away because unfortunately, he was right. That happened one time. Noah raised an eyebrow. It happened 3 times. I stared at him. "You keep track?" "Maybe." That answer made me smile. We sat on my living room floor while the storm continued outside. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional sound of thunder in the distance. Without the usual distractions, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. Noah told me about the pressure he felt growing up. Everyone expected him to have everything figured out. A perfect career, a perfect future, a perfect plan. But he admitted that sometimes he felt like he was just following a path someone else created for him. "I think people see confidence and assume you never doubt yourself," he said. "But sometimes confidence is just learning how to keep going while you are still figuring things out." I looked at him and realized something. Noah was not as untouchable as I first thought. Behind the calm smile and steady voice was someone who was also trying to find his place. Someone who was also afraid of making the wrong choices. Maybe that was why being around him felt so easy. We were both pretending we were stronger than we felt. When the lights finally came back on, neither of us moved right away. For a moment, we just sat there, looking at each other in the warm glow of my apartment lamps. Then Noah smiled softly. "You know, I think this place feels different now." I glanced around the room. The same walls, the same furniture, the same small apartment I had lived in for years. But he was right. Something had changed. And the most surprising part was realizing that the change was not because Noah brought something new into my home. It was because he reminded me that I was allowed to let someone in. I never expected a simple drawing to make me feel completely exposed, especially not when the person standing behind me was Noah. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day that usually disappeared without leaving a memory. I was working at my desk, trying to finish an illustration for a client, when I heard the familiar knock on my door. By now, I already knew that sound. A few months ago, Noah knocking would have been a surprise. Now it felt strangely normal. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and Noah stepped inside holding 2 coffees. "I had a feeling you forgot to take a break again," he said. I looked at my desk covered with sketches and notes. I was taking a break. He glanced at the untouched coffee beside my computer. "Your definition of a break is staring at your screen while forgetting that food exists." I wanted to argue, but unfortunately, he was right. Noah had become very good at noticing the things I tried to ignore. He knew when I was tired before I admitted it. He knew when I was frustrated even when I smiled. Somehow, he had learned the small details of my life without ever making me feel like I was being watched. He just cared. That was the part that scared me the most. Later that evening, Noah asked if he could see the finished illustration I had been working on. Normally, I hated showing unfinished work. My drawings felt personal, like pieces of my thoughts that I was not ready to explain. But with Noah, I found myself saying yes. I turned the screen toward him. He studied it quietly, not the quick glance people usually gave. He actually looked. "Ethan," he said softly, "this is beautiful." I smiled awkwardly. "It is just a drawing." Noah shook his head. "No, it is more than that. You make people feel something." I looked away, suddenly unsure what to do with a compliment that felt too honest. "You always say things like that?" I asked. "Only when I mean them." That answer stayed with me, because Noah was not the type of person who filled silence with unnecessary words. When he said something, he meant it. A few days later, we ended up walking through a small weekend art market downtown. I had planned to spend only 30 minutes there, but Noah somehow turned it into an entire afternoon. We stopped at local booths, talked about paintings, and laughed about the strange things people sold as modern art. At one point, Noah looked at me and smiled. "You are different when you talk about art." Different how? Happier. I did not know why that simple observation affected me so much. Maybe because Noah was noticing a version of me that I had forgotten existed. The version who loved creating things. The version who was not constantly worried about being good enough. That night, I sat at my desk again, but I could not focus. My sketchbook was open in front of me. I stared at the blank page for a long time. Then I started drawing. Not because I had a deadline. Not because someone expected something from me. I drew because I wanted to remember a feeling. And when I finished, I realized I had drawn Noah smiling. I closed the sketchbook quickly, my heart beating faster than it should have. Maybe I was not just getting used to having Noah nearby. Maybe I was starting to understand that some people do not simply enter your life. Some people quietly become the reason you see your own life differently. I thought I understood what was happening between Noah and me. I thought I could name it. Friendship. Comfort. A strong connection between two people who happened to live next door. That explanation worked perfectly until the day Noah found my sketchbook. It was a Saturday morning, and I had completely forgotten that I left it on the coffee table. Normally, I was careful with my drawings. They were personal. They were the place where I put thoughts I was too afraid to say out loud. But after Noah stopped by to return a package, everything changed. He picked up the sketchbook before I noticed. "Ethan, is this yours?" The second I saw it in his hands, my entire body froze. "Yes," I answered too quickly. Noah looked at the cover, then at me. I was not trying to look through it. "It is fine," I said, even though my voice clearly said it was not fine. He opened it too. The page where I had been working the night before. The page with the drawing of him. The room became painfully quiet. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to rewind time. I wanted to somehow explain that I was an artist, and drawing people was normal. Completely normal. Except I knew this was not just a random drawing. I had captured the way Noah smiled when he forgot anyone was watching. The way his expression softened when he talked about things he cared about. The small details I had noticed without meaning to. "You drew me," Noah said softly. I looked down. "I draw people sometimes." He nodded slowly. "I know." Then he looked at the sketch again. "But you do not look at everyone the way you looked at me when you drew this." My heart stopped for a second. I did not know what to say. Noah had always been calm, always patient. But now there was something different in his expression, something I could not understand. "I am sorry," I said quietly. "I did not mean to make things weird." Noah immediately shook his head. "Ethan, you did not make anything weird." That answer surprised me. I had prepared myself for embarrassment, for awkwardness, for the possibility that I had ruined the easy friendship we built. But Noah did not step away. He sat down beside me instead. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I nodded. Noah looked toward the window for a moment before speaking. "When I first moved here, I thought I was just looking for a new apartment. A quieter place. A fresh start." He smiled slightly. "But then I met you." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" Noah took a breath. "It means I noticed you too." The words were simple, but they changed everything. He told me about the first week he lived here. How he noticed the music coming from my apartment while I worked. How he saw my drawings sitting near the window. How he always wondered who the person behind that door was. "I thought you were interesting," he admitted. Even before we talked, I could not stop myself from smiling. For months, I had been wondering if I was imagining the connection between us. If I was the only one who felt something different. But maybe I was not alone. Maybe Noah had been standing on the other side of that same invisible line, wondering if he should cross it too. That afternoon, we sat together in the quiet of my apartment, no longer pretending we were just two neighbors who happened to get along. Nothing dramatic happened. No perfect movie moment. Just two people finally admitting that something meaningful had been growing between them all along. And somehow, that felt even better. After that conversation with Noah, I thought everything would feel different. I expected some huge change. I expected the world to suddenly look brighter or for every moment between us to feel completely different. But the truth was much quieter than that. We were still Noah and Ethan. We still argued about which coffee shop had the best drinks. We still laughed at the same ridiculous things. We still knocked on each other's doors for reasons that were sometimes completely unnecessary. The only difference was that now I knew I was not the only one feeling something. And somehow, that made everything both easier and more complicated. Because once you know someone matters to you, every little thing starts to feel important. A simple message. A smile in the hallway. A few extra minutes standing by the door because neither person wants the conversation to end. Noah and I started spending more time together outside the apartment building. He showed me his favorite places around the city. Small restaurants hidden between busy streets. Quiet parks where he went when he needed to think. Places that had become part of his life before I ever knew he existed. In return, I showed him my world. The art stores where I bought supplies. The tiny cafe where I worked on sketches. The bookstore where I could spend hours without realizing how much time had passed. It felt natural, like we were slowly building a shared collection of memories. But there was one thing I noticed about Noah. He was always there for other people, but he rarely talked about himself. He listened carefully. He remembered details. He offered advice. Yet when conversations turned toward his own feelings, he always found a way to change the subject. One evening, we were sitting on the rooftop of our building, watching the city lights appear one by one. The air was cool, and for once, neither of us felt the need to fill every second with conversation. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Noah looked over. "Of course. Are you happy here?" He seemed surprised by the question. "Why do you ask that?" I shrugged. "Because sometimes it feels like you are waiting for something to happen." Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled softly. "You notice more than you think." I laughed. "That is probably because I spend too much time drawing people." He looked at the city below us. "I guess I am still learning how to be here." "Here as in this building?" I asked. Noah shook his head. "Here as in this version of my life." His answer stayed with me. I realized that Noah was not just starting over because he wanted a different apartment. He was starting over because he wanted to figure out who he was without everyone else's expectations. "You know," I said, "I think you are allowed to not have everything figured out." Noah looked at me and smiled. "That sounds like something you should tell yourself too." I wanted to argue, but I could not. Because he was right. We were both better at giving kindness than accepting it. Later that night, as we walked back to our apartments, Noah stopped outside my door. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making this place feel less like somewhere I moved to and more like somewhere I belong." I smiled. "You did the same for me." After he went inside, I stood there for a moment, looking at the two doors beside each other. A few months ago, they represented two separate lives. Now, they felt like two parts of the same story. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I still had one fear. What happens when the person who makes you feel at home starts wondering if they have somewhere else to go? I always thought the hardest part about letting someone into your life was admitting that you cared. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that the person you cared about might not stay. For weeks, Noah and I had built something that felt impossible to explain. We were not strangers anymore. We were not just neighbors who happened to share a hallway. He had become the first person I wanted to tell things to. The first person I looked for when something funny happened. The first person I thought about when I woke up. And maybe that was exactly why I started noticing the little changes. Noah seemed distracted. He still smiled. He still asked about my day. But sometimes his eyes looked like they were somewhere far away. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was doing what I always did, creating problems before they existed. But then one afternoon, I saw an envelope on his kitchen counter while I was helping him carry some boxes. I was not trying to read it. I was not searching for answers. But one word caught my attention. Chicago. Later that night, I asked him about it. We were sitting in my apartment, sharing takeout like we had done so many times before. "Are you thinking about moving?" I asked. Noah became quiet. That silence told me more than any answer could have. "It is just an opportunity," he finally said. "A big one." I nodded, trying to act like it did not matter. "That is great." But my voice betrayed me. Noah looked at me carefully. "Ethan." I looked away. "What?" "You are doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Pretending you are fine because you do not want anyone to worry about you." I hated how easily he could see through me. I laughed softly. "Maybe I am just happy for you." "You are," he said. "But you are also scared." The truth was, I was scared. Not because Noah had a chance to follow his dreams. I wanted that for him. I was scared because I had finally found someone who made me feel understood, and now I was afraid I would lose him before I even had the courage to say how much he meant to me. "I do not want you to stay because of me," I said quietly. Noah looked surprised. "Ethan, that is not what this is." "I know. I just do not want to be the reason you give up something important." He was silent for a moment. Then he smiled sadly. "You know what I like about you?" I looked at him. "What?" "You always worry about everyone else before yourself." I did not have an answer. Because maybe that was true. Maybe I had spent so much time being afraid of needing someone that I never considered what it felt like to be needed too. The next few days felt different. Not because anything between us had disappeared. Somehow, that made it harder. Noah was still kind, still thoughtful, still the same person I had fallen for. But now there was a question hanging between us. A question neither of us wanted to ask. What happens when two people finally find each other, but life gives them different directions to follow? I stood outside my apartment door that night, looking at Noah's door across the hallway. The space between us was only a few feet, but for the first time since he moved in, it felt like the biggest distance in the world. I spent days pretending everything was normal. I answered Noah's messages. I smiled when I saw him in the hallway. I listened when he talked about the opportunity in Chicago. I told myself that caring about someone meant wanting the best for them, even when their best did not include you. But every time I looked at the apartment door beside mine, I felt the same quiet fear. The person who made this place feel like home might be the same person who left it feeling empty again. Then, one evening, Noah knocked on my door. Not the casual knock he usually used. This one was slower, more careful. When I opened it, he was standing there with a serious expression. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. Finally, Noah sat down and looked at me. "I think I owe you an explanation." I nodded. "You do not have to explain your dreams to me, Noah." He looked surprised. "That is not what I am trying to do." I looked down at my hands. "Then what are you trying to do?" Noah took a breath. "I am trying to explain that you are part of the reason I am confused." I looked up. He continued. "When I moved here, I thought I needed a fresh start. I thought I needed to leave everything behind and prove something to myself. Then I met you." His voice became softer. And, suddenly, I found something I was not looking for. I felt my heart race, but I stayed quiet. Noah smiled slightly. "You made me realize that a place is not what makes you feel at home. People do." I swallowed. "But you still have this opportunity." "I know." He nodded. "And I am not going to pretend it does not matter. But I also do not want to pretend that you do not matter." Those words were everything I had been afraid to hope for. "Noah," I started, but he shook his head gently. "Let me finish." He smiled. "For a long time, I thought choosing myself meant choosing a life where I depended on nobody. But maybe I had the wrong idea. Maybe choosing myself also means being honest about what makes me happy." The room became quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It did not feel like something was ending. It felt like something was finally being said. I looked at the person who had once been a stranger behind a closed door. The person who had become my favorite conversation, my safest place, and the unexpected part of my life I never knew I needed. I was scared, I admitted. I thought if you left, I would lose the best thing that happened to me in years. Noah looked at me with a gentle smile. "Ethan, I am not a place you have to hold on to. I am a person who wants to stand beside you." And somehow, that was exactly what I needed to hear. Months later, the hallway outside our apartments looked the same. The same walls, the same doors, the same quiet building. But everything felt different. My desk was still covered with drawings. Noah still drank coffee every morning. We still laughed about small things that nobody else would understand. The only difference was that now, neither of us was wondering if we belonged. Because sometimes the person who enters your life unexpectedly does not change your world by taking you somewhere new. Sometimes they change it by showing you that the place you were already standing was worth staying in.